Welcome to the first part of The War of Night and Day, The Last Prince by D.D. Poe. Chapter 1. Betrayal. Rain lashed violently against an open window at the castle's highest tower, where time and harsh weather had begun to erode its ancient walls. Framed in this window stood a young man. His pallid skin glowed ghostly against the dark, stormy backdrop. His untidy hazel hair whipped about in the gusts of the early winter breeze, and in his deep blue eyes, a haunting sadness. Tears traced clear paths of sorrow down his face, collecting in the unkempt beard that spoke of days of neglect. With a subtle creak, the door swung open, revealing a rotund figure with chubby cheeks and greasy salt and pepper hair. Her eyes, almost hidden under heavy lids, rested on the boy by the window. In a hushed, gentle tone, she inquired,
"Is the prince coming down for dinner?"
The prince remained still, his silence unbroken. The servant shifted uneasily, trying to maintain her composure.
"The prince really should eat something,"
she added softly. After a moment of silence, the prince turned slightly, his eyes, now pools of remorse, meeting hers. In a faint but firm voice, he replied, ensuring he wouldn't be questioned again.
"I do not wish to eat at this hour, Melinda, but thank you."
Melinda nodded, a mix of concern and understanding in her expression, as she retreated hastily, leaving the prince alone in the silent chamber. Once more, Voldin turned to the rain-soaked window, now allowing a dull fog to seep in uninvited, casting shadows throughout the room. He stepped closer for a clearer view, feeling the raindrops mingle with his hair. The mist blanketed Bylanth like a translucent silk sheet, revealing only the ghostly outlines of the twisted trees in the bull forest, the highest mountain peaks of Hurar reaching towards the sky, and the striking green waters, both beautiful and vast. Gazing upon the land that would be his after tonight, a land he yearned for yet never under such circumstances, Voldin's heart grew heavy. He longed for it, but not like this, not at such a cost. He strained his ears for the sound of footsteps, bracing for the door to burst open. He pictured guards arriving to escort him, forcibly if needed, hoping against hope it would not happen, yet knowing it was inevitable. Breathing slowly, Voldin absorbed the tense silence. He sensed destiny's approach in his very core, helpless to alter its course. Then, just as he anticipated, the door flew open. A tall, muscular knight stood there, his red hair peeking from beneath a silver coif. With a resonant, energetic voice, he uttered the words Voldin dreaded.
"It is time, Prince Voldin. Dawn is upon us."
The knight's bushy mustache hardly moved as he spoke, his words heavy with significance. Voldin could only stand there, blankly staring at the knight, wondering how quickly loyalty can shift, or if the man was simply following orders, as Voldin himself was expected to. Just as the knight hesitated, perhaps to speak again, Voldin rose resolutely and walked out without a word, each step heavy with unspoken thoughts. Voldin and his entourage were the last to arrive at the grounds. The rain's soft patter against the armor of the honorable knights to his right lent a somber tone to the scene. To the left, the wise old men of the loose order huddled, their robes soaked by the relentless rain. In front, the highest of the priests murmured in a divine language, his right hand gripping a large leather-bound book, while his left hand traced symbols in the air. The center space was reserved for the accused. Slowly, Voldin approached the center, where a chained figure stood, his identity shrouded in the foggy air. A part of Voldin clung to the hope that this was all a mistake, a dreadful dream soon to be dispelled. In his heart, he whispered reassurances that any moment now the figure would be revealed as a stranger, and this nightmare would end.
"I must do this."
He whispered to himself repeatedly, seeking strength in the words.
"Be strong. Your father wants you to stay strong."
As Voldin steadied himself, his gaze fell upon Virtman, who stepped forward, the Heartseeker in hand. The sword, an heirloom of Voldin's family, gleamed with an eerie brilliance under the somber sky. Its craftsmanship was unparalleled, but it was the unusual aura surrounding the sword that captivated and unnerved him. The sword seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, its rhythm akin to a beating heart, hinting at a deep, hidden magic within its steel. Voldin had always felt a strange connection to the sword, a sense of power that went beyond its physical form. its full secrets promised to be revealed upon his rise to the throne. Vertman passed the sword to Voldin and retreated to his place among the others from the order. With a deep breath, Voldin drew the blade from its scabbard. Despite its formidable appearance, the sword felt surprisingly right in his hands, its weight manageable, as if it recognized its new bearer. He lifted it above the prisoner's head, not allowing himself to hesitate. Rain pelted everything, including the sword, making tiny droplets race down its groove. Each droplet mirrored the tears he could not shed, the silent cries of a heart torn between duty and love. Voldin's hands trembled as he saw the chains bruising the man's fragile yet sturdy wrists.
Why must it be me?
He whispered to himself, already knowing the answer. As the heir, it was his duty to carry out the sentence, to sever the ties with the traitor and send him to the afterlife. Standing there, sword raised high, Voldin watched as the prisoner slowly turned his head. It was Zekwis Flawler, the king of Bylanth, Voldin's father. His bright blue eyes, moist from either rain or tears, met Voldin's.
I forgive you, son,
he said softly before turning away, bracing for the blow. Voldin's legs trembled uncontrollably. The image of his father's eyes haunted him as lightning illuminated the sky, seeming to jolt his heart into a frenzied beat. His heart pounded, straining against his chest, sweat mingling with the rain in his hair. In that moment of truth, a desperate idea flickered through his mind: to grab his father, fight off the knights, and escape. But he dismissed it as a fanciful thought. This was no fairy tale, and he was no hero. Resolutely, Voldin steadied the blade, closed his eyes tightly, and let the sword fall as if it had a will of its own, as if it yearned to complete this grim task. And then, it was done. Vondel released his sword, letting it fall to the ground as he knelt beside his father's lifeless form. A priest from the order swiftly collected the Heartseeker, cradling it with a reverence akin to protecting a newborn, before sheathing it carefully. Vondel's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and grief. His father had been a just ruler, stern yet equitable. But now, he lay there, as lifeless and disregarded as the vilest criminal. How could his father have betrayed his kingdom, his own son? Vondel wasn't even sure if he wanted the answers to these haunting questions. Deep down, he knew this grim ritual was a long-standing tradition in Bylanth. It was a harsh law, demanding complete disassociation from the traitor to avoid being condemned alongside them. He understood that sparing his father would have signed both their death warrants, and the order would not have hesitated to carry out such a sentence. The law of the land was clear. No one stood above it, not the prince nor even the king. This stern rule was a testament to the strength of the kingdom, a bulwark against both internal dissent and external threats seeking to seize power. Such was the way of Bylanth. Yet this was an unprecedented moment, a prince executing his own father. There had been times when traitors who were brothers, wives, even sons met this fate, but never before a father. For Voldin, attributing his actions to the law or the order felt hollow, an inadequate shield from the weight of his deed. But it was done now. He was the king. Pulling himself together, Vondel surveyed the scene. Heads were bowed all around him, some in respect for the deceased, others possibly in shame. The air was thick with the sense of foreboding. This disgrace would not soon be forgotten, no matter the laws or precautions enacted. Yet, Vondel had neither the mind nor the will to ponder this now. He simply rose and walked towards the castle doors. Keeping his head high, striving to project the image of a king, he avoided meeting anyone's gaze, though he couldn't ignore the whispers that followed him. The castle felt empty, a stark contrast to its usual liveliness. The great hall, normally bustling with people, was now cold and silent, with only the hollow echo of drafts whistling through the corridors. Vondel ascended the spiral staircase to his chamber, now nearly engulfed by water. Black puddles from the unshuttered windows lay scattered across the uneven floor. Pausing beside one such puddle, Vondel peered down into the water. Reflected back at him was the face of a young boy, a 9-year-old Vondel, eyes wide with the despair that had first gripped him upon his mother's passing. That boy had borne no blame for his mother's death, yet he had been steeped in sorrow, an innocence marred by loss. Now, at 16, staring back, was a face no longer innocent, a face that had just condemned a life. The weight of his action, ending his father's life, had extinguished the last remnants of that childhood innocence. He was no longer just a boy. He was a ruler, a decision-maker, and, unavoidably, a killer. Unable to bear the reflection of his transformation, Voldin's gaze fixed on an ornate candle holder nearby. Seizing it, he brought it down forcefully across the water's surface. The still puddle erupted, sending droplets scattering in all directions. Each droplet seemed to echo against the stone floor, amplifying the turmoil within him. For a brief moment, the room was filled with the sound of splashing water, a stark contrast to the silence that had engulfed it before. The ripples distorted and eventually erased the haunting image, much like the peace that had once filled Voldin's life, now disrupted beyond recognition. Drained from relentless wakefulness and barely any food, Voldin collapsed onto his bed. The past few days had spun into a chaotic whirl since the shocking news of his father, King Zaquis, being accused of treason. Sparse details reached him, secret negotiations with King Warmick of Dazarome and incriminating evidence like letters and a royal seal. The Order of Los, the kingdom's council of wise men, demanded swift action, fearing unrest. In his room, veiled in darkness, Voldin's mind swirled with weariness and frustration. He felt a deep unease, sensing the political storms of Bylanth beginning to churn around him. Yet, he was unaware of the twist of fate awaiting him, a mysterious missive that would add another layer to the unfolding intrigue. As Voldin drifted into a fitful sleep, moonlight crept through the broken windows, casting fragmented beams across the room. In their dim glow, he saw parallels to his fractured life, once steady, now shattered by unforeseen events and decisions. It was more than the absence of light around him. It was the overshadowing of a future brimming with uncertain and daunting challenges. Unknown to Voldin, the coming dawn would not only herald a new day but also a revelation set to rock the foundations of his reality again, bringing with it secrets and lies entangled in a complex web. Thank you for listening to Chapter 1 of The War of Night and Day, The Last Prince by D.D. Poe. If you enjoyed it, please like and share. For more, subscribe and hit the bell notification. Chapter 2, The Veiled Truth, coming soon.